ever realize that Alice in Wonderland is telling the same story as the tarot? Yesterday, we retold the Matrix through the tarot. Now, let's do Alice. This information is coming from the Domestic Tarot Workbook, where it breaks down the hero's journey through the major arcana. So we start in the ordinary world, which is represented by the Fool. Just like Alice, the Fool is looking up and dreaming of a new adventure from a place of innocence. And just like Alice, the Fool is about to take a leap of faith, leaving their animal companion behind, just like Alice waving goodbye to her cat as she jumps down the rabbit hole. Next step of the hero's journey is the call to action and the refusal of the call, which is represented by the magician. Now, one interpretation can be that Alice herself is the magician. She's actually the one who dreamt up Wonderland. It might be more accurate to say that it's the white rabbit. The resemblance in clothing is quite interesting. Also, the as above, so below hand gesture with one hand holding a wand the whole time. Infinity symbol correlation, and the whole pulling a white rabbit out of a hat thing comes from magicians. So next we have the High Priestess, which represents Alice descending into the subconscious mind and her inner world. Okay, now this is very interesting. When Alice touches the water in the pond, this is when the white rabbit first appears and when we first enter Alice's subconscious mind. As you can see here, the High Priestess's blue dress turns into water. This is the first time that water is introduced into the tarot. And every time you see water in a tarot card, it's linked to the element of water, which is emotions, and the moon, which is the subconscious. Now, the next part of the hero's journey is to meet the mentors. And this is when Alice meets the doorknob, which is the Emperor archetype. Represents structure, authority, as well as protection and focus. And this here is a modern depiction. I love this image from the Artist Decoded Tarot. The card also represents the sign of Aries. It represents initiation and courage. The next step on the journey is to cross the threshold, which is represented by the Chariot card. It can quite literally be interpreted as when she shrinks and goes inside of the bottle, which is what passes her through the door into Wonderland. On the other side, this is where she meets Tweedledee and Tweedledum, which represents the Lover's card. The Lover's card is more than romantic relationships. It's any type of partnership and duality, which is quite literally depicted when Tweedledee and Tweedledum show themselves as the sun and moon. You can see this more neutral partnership represented in the Dreamer's Tarot as twins instead of lovers. Next, we have the Strength card, which is when Alice starts to gain confidence in Wonderland, when the flowers start to insult her appearance for looking different than them, of which that look quite literally like the lion on the card. Next, we have the Hermit. The caterpillar quite literally looks like the Hermit card. This is represented by his peace in solitude, as well as the wisdom that he shares with Alice. Now we're in the tests, allies, and enemies portion of the hero's journey, which is when Alice meets the Mad Hatter. Now, the Wheel of Fortune is connected to Jupiter, which signifies abundance, which is what we see all over the table at the tea party. But it's also a change of events. Just as Alice is finally sick of the nonsense happening at this tea party and is about to leave, the White Rabbit appears again, which brings us back to the fate and destiny aspect of this card. Now, the next step of the journey is to approach the innermost cave, which is represented by the Hanged Man card. Now, the Cheshire Cat hanging upside down from a tree, kind of obvious. However, this card also represents the lack of direction and uncertainty. Could not line up more perfectly with what happens between Alice and the Cheshire Cat. She asks him, which direction should I go? And he tells her it doesn't matter which direction you go unless you know where you want to be. Also, the calmness of the Hanged Man. The Cheshire Cat is one of the only characters that is not frustrated with Alice. The next step on the hero's journey is the Ordeal, which is represented by the Death card in tarot, which becomes pretty literal when the Queen says off with her head and sentences Alice to death. But then some balance is restored, and the Queen of Hearts says they can't sentence her to death without a trial, which, slightly out of order, brings us the Justice card. And as the enemy, the Queen of Hearts is definitely the Devil card in this, even though she is literally the Queen of Cups, because Cups is the suit of hearts in tarot, but we're only dealing with the major arcana here right now. Which leads to the Tower moment, where she is still sentenced to off with her head. This Tower moment is that it looks like it's the end of Alice. Then we have the final stage of the hero's journey, Return with the Elixir. Again, the resemblance is so interesting with the Judgment card. The White Rabbit's trumpet The people rising from their grave actually does resemble the cards. Then we have the star card, which represents hope. Alice remembers that she has a piece of the cookies that make her grow. She turns into a giant and is able to escape. Then we have the moon card, which represents illusion, and this is when she realizes that she's dreaming. Finish it out with the world card. Alice wakes up in the real world. She realizes that Wonderland is inside of her. This card that represents completion as well as integration. Now, there's many Alice in Wonderland tarot decks out there on the market. This is just referencing a couple here. However, the artists of these decks chose different interpretations, as well as some interpretations which were the same, such as these. But I'm sorry, Alice's sister as the Hierophant, get out of here.